I'm 82 years old. I used to think that staying quiet kept the peace. Now I know it didn't. It just gave problems room to grow until they swallowed us whole. I'm not telling this because I want forgiveness. Most of the people who would need to forgive me are gone or too far away to hear this. I'm telling it because I don't have much time left, and this truth has been sitting in my chest for decades, getting heavier every year. These days are quiet, not the good kind of quiet. The kind where the house makes more noise than the people in it. The refrigerator hums. Sometimes I sit in my chair and realize hours have passed without a single word spoken out loud. When you're young, you think silence is empty. When you're old, you learn it's full of everything you didn't say. I didn't grow up in a family that talked much. We worked, we ate, we slept. My father believed feelings were private, almost shameful. My mother was kind, but tired. She kept things moving and didn't ask many questions. If something hurt, you swallowed it and went on. That was normal to me. So when I got married in my 20s, I brought that same habit with me. My wife, Margaret, was the opposite. She talked through everything. Little things, big things, things that didn't even seem like things to me at the time. At first, I thought it was charming. Then I thought it was unnecessary. Eventually, I thought it was exhausting. I worked long hours back then. Construction. Honest work, but hard on the body and harder on the patience. I came home tired, sore, and already used up. When Margaret wanted to talk about her day or the kids or something that bothered her, I'd nod. Sometimes I'd grunt. Often, I'd stay quiet. I told myself I was being calm. I told myself I was avoiding arguments. I told myself that silence was better than saying the wrong thing. What I didn't understand was that silence is still saying something. We had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. They were good kids, loud, curious, always asking questions. At first I answered them. Later, I'd say, not now. We'll talk about it another time. Another time became a familiar phrase in our house. It sounded reasonable, responsible even. There was always something else to handle first. Bills, work, repairs, sleep. I thought I was being a good provider. I didn't drink much. I didn't gamble. I didn't disappear. I was there physically every day. I just wasn't present. Margaret would try to tell me when she felt lonely. You don't really hear me anymore. I miss when we used to talk. Are you upset with me? I wasn't upset. I was tired. And instead of explaining that, instead of meeting her halfway, I stayed quiet. I'd shrug. I'd say, everything's fine. Everything wasn't fine, it just wasn't loud yet. The kids learned early not to come to me with anything complicated. They went to their mother. She handled emotions. I handled logistics. That became the unspoken arrangement. At school events, I sat in the back. At dinners, I listened more than I spoke. When conflicts came up between the kids, I told them to work it out themselves. I thought I was teaching independence. What I was really teaching was distance. Years went by like that. Not in big jumps, just slowly. One routine bleeding into the next. The kids grew, voices changed, interests shifted, and I stayed the same. I told myself there would be time later, when work slowed down, when the kids were older, when things were easier. Later is a dangerous word. It sounds harmless. It feels responsible. But it assumes life will wait for you. Margaret and I started sleeping on opposite sides of the bed, then eventually in separate rooms. There was no big fight, no dramatic moment, just a quiet understanding that something between us had gone cold. She tried once more than the others to talk to me about it. I remember it clearly because it annoyed me at the time. She stood in the kitchen, holding a dish towel, and said, "I feel like I'm living with a stranger." I didn't know how to respond. So I didn't. She waited, then she nodded, slowly, like she'd just received an answer she'd been expecting. That was the moment, though I didn't know it then. That was the moment something broke. After that, she stopped asking. People think the worst damage comes from yelling or cruelty. Sometimes it does, but silence is quieter. It slips in unnoticed. It doesn't raise alarms. It just erodes. The kids left home one by one. College, work, marriages of their own. They called their mother more than they called me. I noticed. It stung, but I told myself it was normal. What would they even want to talk to me about, I'd think. That question should have scared me. It didn't. Margaret got sick in her late 60s. Not suddenly, it started with fatigue, then tests, then treatments, hospital rooms with bad lighting and uncomfortable chairs. I was there. I drove her to appointments. I sat beside her bed. I did everything practical. But I still didn't talk. I didn't tell her I was afraid. I didn't tell her I regretted things. I didn't tell her I loved her in the way she needed to hear it. Assume she knew. One night, near the end, she asked me a question I still hear in my head. Did I matter to you? It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusing. It was quiet, curious, almost, like she was genuinely wondering. I froze. My chest tightened. A lifetime of unsaid words pressed up against my throat. And I said, "Of course." That was it. One sentence, flat, inadequate. She nodded and turned her head toward the window. She never asked again. She died 2 weeks later. At the funeral, people told me what a good husband I'd been, how devoted, how steady. I nodded and thanked them. Inside, I felt like a fraud. After she was gone, the silence became unbearable. There was no one left to deflect it onto, no one filling the space with words I could ignore. The kids came by for a while, helped with paperwork, sorted through belongings. Then they went back to their lives. Phone calls became less frequent. Holidays became shorter. Conversations stayed shallow. I wanted to say something then. I wanted to tell them I was sorry, that I hadn't known how to talk, that I hadn't meant to be distant. But by then, the habits were too deep, and I was afraid of opening something I couldn't close, afraid of hearing things I didn't want to know, afraid that my words would come out wrong like they always had. So I stayed quiet. Years passed. Grandchildren were born. Saw pictures. Sometimes I visited. They were polite, sweet. They didn't really know me. I realized slowly that I was becoming a footnote, a background character in my own family, not because I was cruel, not because I was absent, because I was silent. Now, at 82, I spend a lot of time remembering conversations that never happened, apologies that stayed in my head, love that went unspoken because I assumed it was obvious. It wasn't obvious. Love that isn't expressed doesn't feel like love to the person waiting for it. There are things that can't be fixed now. Margaret will never know how much I admired her strength. My children will never hear me say I should have listened more. I can't go back and sit on the floor with them when they were small and actually hear their worries. Time doesn't bend, it doesn't negotiate, it just moves on. I don't beat myself up anymore. That kind of regret doesn't help. But I do sit with the truth. Silence didn't protect my family. It slowly pushed them away. If you're listening to this and you still have people in your life who are trying to talk to you, I hope you understand something I didn't. They're not asking for perfect words. They're not asking for solutions. Most of the time, they're just asking to be seen. I thought saying nothing was safer than saying the wrong thing. I was wrong. Sometimes the wrong words can be forgiven. I don't have many years left. I can feel it in my body, in the way mornings come slower, in the way nights stretch longer. I speak more now, even if my voice shakes. I tell my children I love them when we talk. I ask questions even if the answers hurt a little. It doesn't undo the past. But it's what I have. If this meant something to you, maybe sit with it for a moment. You don't have to rush anywhere. That's something I wish I had learned sooner too.